Gender equality is not just a matter of human rights, it is key to eradicating poverty and hunger. It is by bridging the gender gap that agriculture and rural development can reach their full potentials. The Gender Desk in the Federal Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Development is driving the move to implement the National Gender Policy on Agriculture, and Ifoma Anyanwu is the head of the desk. She leads us into the activities of the Gender Desk and how far the government has gone in implementing the National Gender Policy.
Nigeria's population is growing at 2.55% annually, an indication that Nigeria's current fertility rate stands at 5,212 births per woman every year. By this rate, girl child birth is at 2,102 annually. Data shows that Nigeria's female population stands at approximately 101.67 million, while the male population amounted to approximately 104.47 million inhabitants. In this recognition, a national gender policy (NGP) was developed to replace an erstwhile national policy on women to actually eliminate gender inequality and disparity barriers that placed women as minorities. The objective of the National Gender Policy (NGP) is to establish the framework for gender responsiveness in all public and private spheres. This was done not only to economically empower women through income earnings, but also consciously empowering them to own production assets. For effective implementation of the policy, a National Gender Strategic Framework (NGSF) was also developed. The NGSF outlined explicit implementation, monitoring and evaluation guidelines for achieving measurable targets and enhancing accountability to gender equality and women empowerment. This brought about the realization of the importance of women in agriculture and their impact in achieving and promoting food security and economic development. With this development, the federal government of Nigeria in 2019 launched a National Gender Policy in Agriculture (NGPA) to give women farmers across the country access to farm input and participation in the agricultural sector. The main purpose of gender policy for the agriculture sector is to promote and ensure the adoption of gender-sensitive and gender-responsive approaches to the agriculture sector planning and programming, such that men and women have equal access to and control of productive resources and opportunities to achieve their potentials. Ifoma Anyanwu is the head gender in the Ministry of Agriculture, driving the Gender Desk and ensuring the implementation of the gender policy in agriculture. She's here to take us through the processes and the goals achieved so far.
Nigerian women will always remember one of the past permanent secretary who actually provided a formidable platform for the national gender policy in agriculture to be brought on board. I'm talking about Mrs. Ibukun Odushete. She is one of the women that have demonstrated gender sensitivity in terms of addressing the concerns of women. When she was in the ministry as the Permanent Secretary, Federal Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Development, she encouraged the gender unit to ensure that women concerns are addressed through a policy document. To that effect, the policy, the National Gender Policy draft document was produced under her. The Nigerian women owe her a lot of gratitude because there's no way the history of this policy will be mentioned without mentioning her name. Another past permanent secretary, Dr. M. Ahmed, who actually provided a budget line to ensure that gender issues were addressed. Recall that in 2015, 2016, to be precise, there were gender auditors, international gender auditors, that assessed all the gender units in Nigeria. And eventually, the gender unit of this ministry was rated as the best gender unit in Nigeria. To that effect, we requested the then permanent secretary, for a budget line, because we cannot address the concerns of women in a vacuum without policy direction. He graciously granted a budget line to be provided. So the concerns of women had to find expression in the budgetary provision of this ministry. And this provided an avenue for the funding of the ministry's gender programs. And we owe a lot of gratitude to him. My director, the former director, Special Duties, or Director Gender, Mr. Zubairu Abdullahi, actually facilitated the launch of this policy. And he was able to harmonize conflicting variables and ensure that we had a successful policy launch, who actually worked hard to ensure that this document was launched.
The National Gender Policy in Agriculture is a sectoral gender mainstreaming strategy document that seeks to complement existing policies in the agricultural sector, as well as its strategic implementation framework and plan. It is an assertive document which recognizes the limitation of growth and development of the agricultural sector because of the exclusion of smallholder women farmers in strategic participation and in key decisions making and access to agricultural assets.
That was Ifeoma Anyanwu, the head gender desk in the Federal Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Development, throwing more light on how the national gender policy in agriculture came into force. But is the policy implementable? And does it have the capacity to bridge the gender gap in agriculture as envisaged?
It is evidential that to end hunger in Nigeria, it is imperative to empower women in agriculture. Across developing countries, women in agriculture make up 43% of the agricultural labor force. Many of them are smallholder farmers, and from paid employment to trade and marketing, they participate in all aspects of rural life. They raise crops and animals, collect water and wood for fuel, and care for the family members. Women are more likely to reinvest their income back into their families to improve education, nutrition, and health. Yet, women farmers are not as productive as men due to less access to land, markets, farming technologies, fertilizer, credit, and training. That is a lot of untapped potential. It is obvious that if women had equal access to opportunities and resources, they could increase their yields and feed more hungry people in the country. In fact, if women had the same access to productive resources as men, they could increase their farm yields by more than 50%, feeding an additional 150 million people in Nigeria. The policy was clear that when women flourish, families and communities do too. That's why the gender policy seeks to empower women by promoting women's leadership in agriculture, fostering policy changes that increase women's land ownership and strengthening women's access to financial services.
The policy is actually developed to bridge the gender gap in implementing agricultural policies in Nigeria. So it has areas about capacity building, extension services, labor-saving technologies, and different trainings, including coming up with specific gender disaggregated data for implementation of quality programs in the agriculture sector.
No farmer, no nation. No farmer, no food.
There are potential risks associated with lack of knowledge of gender that can be mitigated through sensitization workshops. And this is what we have just done to build the competencies, skills of gender desk officers so that they can identify gender issues and address them. Because if you are not trained on gender issues, you might not be able to address the challenges women face. Secondly, we've actually built the skills and competencies of women farmers on sustainable development goals and how they can launch into this and empower themselves.
The launch of the National Gender Policy in Agriculture is at the heart of Zero Hunger Strategy, an understanding that women play a vital role in advancing agricultural development and food security, helping to reduce poverty and promote global stability. Through the initiative, women farmers are provided with training and opportunities to adopt new agricultural technologies in order to increase their productivity, reduce unpaid work, and improve their family's nutritional status. So far, the policy has helped women farmers understand their strength and the possibilities that lies within them. It has also encouraged them to strive further with the hope of a better tomorrow.
And we have also access to input and credit, and we have also access to market, and most importantly now, access to technology.
Women are responsible for carrying out 70% of agricultural labor, 60% of agricultural processing activities, and 50% of animal husbandry related activities. Yet, women have access to less than 20% of agricultural input. And of course, that leads me to the issue of sustainable development goal, particularly goal number 5, that is predicated on empowerment of all women and empowerment of all girls.
The policy is working, as it has provided an avenue for smallholder women farmers to create an organization that interacts with duty bearers, key stakeholders, and donors in the agriculture sector, driving discussions on participation and involvement of smallholder women farmers in agriculture policies and programs. It has provided a forum for accountability by Smallholder Women Farmers Organization in Nigeria executives, its board of trustees, and the General Assembly. Smallholder women farmers are happy as the policy has exposed them to several opportunities in the agriculture sector. They commend the Federal Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Development, FMARD, for the development of the National Gender Policy in Agriculture and for constituting an inclusion of the Small-Scale Women Farmers Organization in Nigeria, SWOFON, in the National Gender Steering Committee for the implementation of the policy, in a bid to offer equal access and gender-sensitive approaches towards food production. They also commend Action Aid Nigeria for simplifying the National Gender Policy in Agriculture for smallholder women farmers.